there, it's Kevin from RogueDeckBuilder.com here with January's episode of the Rogue Market. And this is going to be a fairly long episode. I'll try to cut it down into multiple videos because we have a ton of content to work with. First of all, I'm going to do a review, as I always do, for my last two episodes. And so I'll just begin with starting off with my Modern. 2 months ago in, I believe, either October or November, I did a Modern speculation on what I think the best pickups would be from the Zendikar and Scars of Mirrodin block for the upcoming Modern Masters, which is going to be released, I believe, in June. And Wizards has already stated that they are going to be promoting Modern like crazy. We are entering a Modern season here as well for the PTQs and just the Pro Tour. So we've already started to see some spike increases on a lot of Modern cards. However, I still think there was a lot of potential in these Scars cards that I predicted last time, and I'm just going to go over the ones that I predicted would go up in value. And keep in mind that these predictions were for 6 months to a year, and I've already started to see some spike increases, albeit they are small, but they are significant. If you think about how cheap you're getting these cards for, $1 increase is a lot. It's some of these, it's like a 20-25% increase. We compare that to a $20 card. That's like a $20 card going up to like $25. So kind of like penny stocks. If a penny stock goes up by 3 pennies, you've made a 300% profit. So it's a lot better, say, than your $25 stock going up to 30. So anyway, let's just run down that list from our Modern picks. If you haven't seen the video, I will have a link here to go back and see that video on what Modern cards I suggest you pick up. Number 1 on that list was Inkmoth Nexus. Inkmoth Nexus at the time that I predicted it was at $4. And now checking it this morning on StarCityGames.com, it is up to $5. And it seems like their inventory is moving pretty quickly. This isn't a very hard card to find, as it was a 1 of and a 2 of in various event decks, and it was a very popular card in Standard as well, so there's a lot of cards floating around. But it is $4 to $5 is a nice little jump for 2 months, and my predictions again were for 6 to a year. Especially my predictions for post-June was when I was really thinking these cards would spike, because as I stated earlier in my Modern video, it's because Scars, Zendikar are not being reprinted in the Modern Masters. So we're going to see at least a bit of flood in the market with anything from Mirrodin to the Shards of Alar blocks due to the Modern Masters. And Vegas is just going to flood the market like crazy anyway, because they're going to have the supply for, I think Grand Prix are getting around 1,200 to 1,500 people in the main event. And the main event there, and we don't know if they'll even have it as a side event, but the main event at the Grand Prix Vegas next year is going to be Modern Masters Draft. So they're going to have enough product for 1,200 to 1,500 players, and Vegas seems to be a very popular venue as well. And if that is the case, we could actually see record numbers coming to this Grand Prix that they want to. This is a once in a lifetime chance to do a limited format with. This is the only Grand Prix that they have, only major event they have scheduled for Modern Masters Limited. So I'm thinking there's a lot of people that are going to make that flight to Vegas to play in this, because it is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it should be very fun. They've already stated that this Modern Masters, they're printing it for draftability. They want to be able to draft this and be able to make cool Modern decks out of your draft, and then of course play it in a draft. So they've also said that they want each store to reserve at least 1 box for their own little Modern Masters release draft, or I'm assuming it will be a draft format for the pre-release or release for Modern Masters, and they're encouraging that every store set aside 1 box, so at least have 1 Modern Draft for 8 players. These Modern Masters are going to cost $7 a pack, and there's going to be 24 packs in a booster box, and so it's perfect for an 8-man pool to draft if there's 7. So charge like $25, and each player will get 3 packs and be able to draft this Modern Masters. Anywho, that's my explanation of why I believe that Scars and Zendikar are going to go up, because all of the supply of the rest of the Modern is going to be, at least initially, increased, and then they'll encourage more people to play Modern. There'll be more cards for people to pick up to finish off their Modern decks, and then they will need to pick up the Scars and the Zendikar stuff that's not in Modern Masters to finish off their deck. And anywho, one of those is my number one, which is Inkmoth Nexus, which is found again in the Bug Infect deck, or sometimes it's just mono green Infect. Very popular with Noble Hierarch, and Inkmoth Nexus is of course a very key card to that deck. Another deck that it's a very key card in is Affinity, which is a very, very popular Modern deck as well. So Inkmoth Nexus going to 4 to 5 already in just 2 months is a good signal that this card is going to explode, and I'm very confident in this card. I'm going to post a video here after this video on my own personal collection, where I'll show you that I am practicing what I preach. I am picking up these cards like they're going out of style. I'm stockpiling on Inkmoth Nexuses. It is my number one targeted card. And sometimes I can still get it for $3 to $4. I'll ask my people that I trade, well, this is a rotated card. You're a standard player. It's hard to find Modern players to trade for it. What do you value Inkmoth Nexus? And they'll be like, here are 4 Inkmoth Nexuses for this $12 card. I'm like, okay, cool. That works for me. I think that I was able to trade, my last big trade was a ton of Scars Fastlands that I got for $2 to $3 a piece. I think I traded like 7 Scars Fastlands for Jace Architect of Thought. And yes, I do believe that Jace Architect of Thought is going to go up in value, but I do believe that the Scars Fastlands are going to increase at a greater rate than Jace Architect of Thought will in the long term, especially getting those at $2 to $3 when they're already higher than that. So anyway, we'll go on. I'll talk about Scars Fastlands later, but we'll go on to number 2, which is Birthing Pod. Birthing Pod, when I suggested you pick it up, was at $3. It is now at $4 on Star City, and it looks like the inventory is moving quite quickly on this card as well. Pod decks are coming back into style, as they are very good against Jund. It's hit or miss. It's a combo deck that doesn't need its combo, and it's very popular. It's a fun deck to play. You have your combo win condition, but you just have an aggressive. And the great thing about Birthing Pod is you can go fetch an answer to any of the other combo decks. In their sideboard, they have 1-ofs and 2-ofs of cards that just completely shut down certain combo decks. So Birthing Pod's a very popular deck just for that. It has an answer to every deck, and that is very important in this format. So $4 is still a bargain. The third card on the list that I suggested picking up was the Scars Fastlands, and I focused especially on Copperline Gorge and Razorverge Thicket, as Star City already did increase their prices at the time of this prediction for Blackcleave, Seachrome, and Darkslick. Now, if we look at the prices, when I made this prediction, Razorverge Thicket was at $2 and Copperline Gorge was at $3. Respectively, Razorverge Thicket is now at $3 and Copperline Gorge is at $4. I still do pick up Copperline Gorges, but since I'm going to retract saying pick those up like crazy, because I have scoured and scoured the data on MTGOnline.com and a few other Modern tournaments, and Copperline Gorge is usually only a 1-of in a few decks, whereas Razorverge Thicket is a 4-of in multiple decks. It was a 4-of in Brian Kibler's Hate Bears deck, even though he doesn't like us calling it Hate Bears. But anyway, it's a green-white aggro deck that has a lot of answers for combo decks and supposedly works very well against Jund with Locks and Smiters. I'm trying to think, is it Wiltleaf? Yeah, Wiltleaf Liege. The green-white gives +1/+1 to all green creatures and +1/+1 to all white creatures. So you pop that down 4th turn, and your Locksmith Smiters a 6/6, and all the opposing Tarmogoyfs aren't going to be able to block your 6/6. Last week, and I'm going to talk about this in part 2 or part 3 of this episode of the Rogue Market, there is a new deck that is making a huge waves in the Modern world, and it is an enchantment deck. It's a green-white enchantment deck with Rancors and I can't remember. I'll have to look up the other card. It's a double white for target creature gets +3/+3 trample, first strike. I don't know if it's trample, but like first strike, life, like a ton of abilities. But you have to enchant a creature that's already enchanted. So it's basically an enchantment deck on a bunch of 1-drops that are hexproof, and you get that one dude pretty big, and it kind of works like Infect. Very, very fast, aggressive deck. And anyway, it's green-white, and one of their preferred lands is Razorverge Thicket, which is a 4-of in that deck as well. Also, Razorverge Thicket is a 4-of in Pod. It is their Scar's fast land they prefer to run. They prefer to run the fetches for the other combinations they need in their deck to go get their red source or go get, say, their black source. But in Pod, for their green and white source, for their first turn Noble Hierarch or first turn Birds of Paradise, they prefer the Razorverge Thicket. So I have no idea why Razorverge Thicket is still the least expensive fast land when it is the most played fast land. The other fast land that is being played like crazy is Seachrome Coast. They play it in Fairies and in Merfolk, as they don't like a big land count, and it comes into play untapped, doesn't shock them. And it works perfectly with their Aether Vial strategy, where they don't want a lot of lands to begin with. So Seachrome Coast, I do believe, are down to 4 now. They're either 4 or 5, so I think that's another very safe one to pick up, as it is a 4-of in a lot of these blue-white decks. Darkslick Shores, I do see every once in a while in various deck lists, but it is definitely not as popular as Razorverge Thicket or Seachrome Coast. So now, if I were to focus on 2 of them, 2 of the Scar's fast lands, it would definitely be Razorverge Thicket and Seachrome Coast. Moving on to my number 4 pick, which was Verdant Catacombs. Verdant Catacombs at the time of my prediction was $12, and now it is $25. This might be the force of will problem of Legacy, meaning that a lot of new players are deterred joining Legacy when you need 4 of a $70 card. Basically, I would say any deck playing blue in Legacy, which is most of them, you need 4 Force of Wills to compete. And then on top of that, you usually have the original dual lands with no drawbacks. They're just dual lands that come into play. The good old revised dual lands like Taiga and Bayou and whatnot. So those are usually around $100 each. And so just from the Force of Wills and the dual lands alone, you're already looking at $600, $800 just from those. And so to make a competitive Legacy deck, you're looking at a good $1,500. Sure, there are more budget ones that you can run, but of course you're not picking up these dual lands, which help, and you're not picking up these Force of Wills, which are a must in a lot of these decks. So when I'm making the comparison back to these fetch lands out of Zendikar, is they're not being reprinted in Modern Masters, and Scalding Tarn and Misty Rainforest, Star City already pulled a move and bought all the vendors out on the internet and jacked up their own prices to $35 to kind of guarantee that they have enough supply for their own Legacy tournaments. So we initially saw the blue fetch lands spike up to $35, but Verdant Catacombs is now at $25. So it went from 12 to 25 in 2 months. On Magic the Gathering Online, we have already seen that there sometimes are multiple Modern tournaments per day, and they seem to fill up pretty quickly. I mean, a lot of people are playing in them. It used to be around like 16 to 30 people would do a Modern tournament, and now we're seeing about the same number as Standard. You could see numbers up to the hundreds like you see on the average Standard daily tournament. And they're also doing a lot of Modern Premier tournaments, which have good prize payouts. So a lot of people on MTGO are starting to switch over to Modern. And we've seen a huge increase in a lot of the Modern cards, especially the fast lands. And we're already starting to see like Verdant Catacombs. As I predicted, it was the #1 used fetch land in the Modern format because of its popularity in Jund and in Bug Infect, which were 2 very popular decks at the time. And so it's up to $25, and I don't see the price going down or this trend of just skyrocketing anytime soon. So this is going to be Wizards' problem that they're going to have to deal with. They need to find a solution for these for these fetch lands from Zendikar. Otherwise, it's going to do the same thing that happened with Legacy and deter new players from entering this format because they can't afford lands. I mean, as a new player, when you're a beginner, lands are the most unexciting cards ever. And you hate to have to fork out a pretty penny for lands. I mean, the most expensive card in your deck is a land. Yeah, it pretty much puts a damper on that on your excitement for playing that format. So I hope that I'm hoping is that we see one or two Marsh Flats in the Sorin versus T-Ball deck. I think that'd be a great idea for Wizards to kind of decrease the price of Marsh Flats. I think Marsh Flats are $20 now. That's one way of getting one of the fetch lands down in value, is to print multiple copies of it like they did in Inkmoth Nexus in the event deck, or certain other cards in certain event decks, is to print multiple copies in the Sorin versus T-Ball. Do I think that will happen? I doubt it, but that would be a solution for Wizards to try to add numbers of these fetch lands into the modern pool so people are actually able to play this format. Anyway, that's enough talking about that. Verdant Catacombs, I'm not going to pick them up at $25. It's way too pretty of a penny for me to invest in. I'd rather spend $25 in Inkmoth Nexuses or Birthing Pods, as I do think that they, even if you see a $5 increase in Verdant Catacomb, that's like seeing a $1 increase in Inkmoth Nexus if you bought 5 copies. And I do see the scenario of Inkmoth Nexus going up to $6. I am more able to see that scenario panning out, where Inkmoth Nexus goes up $1 than Verdant Catacombs goes up $5. In fact, I still expect Inkmoth Nexus to be a $10 card by June. That is my prediction. So anyway, onto another Scars card. What I predicted was Etched Champion. Etched Champion was at $3 at the time of the prediction. It is now sitting at $4, which is sold out on Star City. Sold out for the second time, I've noticed, since I've made this prediction. So once they refill their inventory, I do believe Etched Champion will go up to $5. It is a very, very popular card in robots and Affinity. Usually, even though it's just a sideboard card, they have replaced it with Master of the Ethereum, is that what it's called? Anyway, the Master Robots card, and they've stuffed Etched Champion in the sideboard, but a sideboard is still a card in a deck. I mean, you still need to have 4 copies of it, and it is a 4 of, and it's a good answer versus like Burn. A lot of times they won't have a way to get rid of the Etched Champion that can block all day long, and actually put them in a very rough spot with a cranial plating attached to an Etched Champion. An indestructible card is very hard for a lot of these cards. Or John too. John can't target it with Abrupt Decay. All you have to have is like a Blinkmoth Nexus down and a Dark Steel, whatever the Dark Steel land is, indestructible, and basically your Etched Champion is indestructible, and they have no way of getting rid of it. So Etched Champion is a very, very good sideboard card for Affinity and robots. It's $4 right now, like I said, sold out on Star City. I think it's gonna increase just like Inkmoth Nexus and Birthing Pod. It's not gonna go down. It's the only way it's gonna go is up. And Affinity is gonna be a very popular deck, as it will be accessible. It doesn't require fetch lands. It does require some Blink Moths, which are going to be, in my opinion, reprinted in Modern Masters. And most of the cards you can pick up from either Scars or the various formats. I mean, a ton of the cards out of this Affinity deck are commons to begin with, like Cranial Plating, Signal Pest, Memnite. Those sort of cards are easy to find because they're commons and uncommons. So Affinity is going to be a very popular deck to newcomers coming into the format. It's a very, very good deck. It has a very good matchup against the format. It's a very aggressive deck, and I've talked before about how new players tend to trend towards aggressive decks to begin with because they're more self-explanatory and easier to run. So on to number 6 card is Honor of the Pure that I predicted. It was sitting at $1 to $2, and it's still around $1 to $2. It's the only card on my list that hasn't seen a price increase. But I do believe that it will go up, because I have noticed at the time I made this prediction, Soul Sisters was kind of, especially Pro Tour Return to Ravnica, which is the modern format, you didn't see a lot of Soul Sisters decks. It didn't have very good placing. But recently on MTGO, man, the Soul Sisters have been everywhere. Different variants of Soul Sisters or tokens, and Honor of the Pure is a 4 in those decks, and it's sitting at $1 or $2. Still has a lot of casual play. I see a lot of people running Honor of the Pure decks casually. EDH, I see people even running it. So Honor of the Pure at $1 to $2, I still think is a huge bargain. And if Soul Sisters, again, Soul Sisters is going to be affected the same way that Affinity or Storm or Tron or some of these other more cheap decks, by cheap meaning not expensive, a lot of these decks don't require any fetch lands, and Soul Sisters is another one that the core of the deck is all commons and uncommons, and the rares right now are sitting around like $5 to $6. I mean, I think Proclamation of Rebirth, if you're even running that version, is the most expensive card out of Soul Sisters. And so a bunch of new players are going to eventually turn over to Modern, especially now it's going to be an F&M format, and it's going to be the Pro Tour format. Soul Sisters is a very good option for new players as it is very inexpensive. In fact, the store owner at my local store that I play, we actually for F&M this week did Modern instead of Standard. We didn't have enough people interested in Standard, and we had more people interested in Modern, so we did Modern, and actually a bunch of people ran their Standard decks and did pretty well with their Standard decks in the Modern format. But after the tournament was done, there's a lot of people complaining, saying, well, I can't afford Modern, and I ended up going 3-1 in the Modern tournament. And so he used me as an example. He's like, well, Kevin came here. He's like, what's your deck, Kevin? I'm like, it's mostly commons and uncommons that I just found out of, the junk pile here. I picked up Soul Sisters, for 5 cents a piece. Johnny Pridemates. I actually got a ton of Johnny's Pridemates by buying people's collections and just finding them in the collections. I was buying commons at 0.5 cents and uncommons at 1 cent a piece, and people would just bring in their bulk, and I'd $20 for a huge box full of stuff, and I was able to find. I have like 14 of Johnny's Pridemates, and same thing with Soul Sisters. I have so many Soul Sisters that I don't know what to do with them, but. So that's why I threw together this Soul Sisters deck, because I had the cards and I didn't have to go pick up any $25 fetch lands or $40 Thoughtseize or $115 Tarmogoyfs. So it's a very competitive deck at a very, very budget price, and Honor of the Pure is a key card to that deck. So it's going to have kind of the Hellrider. What Hellrider did to Red Deck Wins, people started going to Red Deck Wins because Thundermaw, Hellkite, and Hellrider were very affordable. And when everyone made that move to Red Deck Wins at a competitive deck for cheap, then the price increase of those key cards like Thundermaw and Hellrider skyrocketed. So we could see this with Soul Sisters as Honor of the Pure skyrocketing in value. I don't know if skyrocketing, it has been reprinted a couple times, I believe, maybe at least in 2 sets. And again, this is a card that I see quite frequently in a lot of people's trade binders. It was printed in the Titan era, and M12 and M11 were purchased like crazy for people trying to get those Titans. So Honor of the Pure in a rare and a set that was open quite frequently, right there, the supply is very great compared to the demand. But I do believe, like I said, the demand will eventually meet the supply, and we'll see an increase in Honor of the Pure. Go on to the 7th card, Spellskite. This card is being used everywhere. It is a sideboard card for a ton of decks. It was $1 to $2 at the prediction of this when I made this, and now it is at $3, so a little bit of an increase as well. But it's one of those cards that it really depends a lot on Splinter Twin. Splinter Twin, it's a key card, key sideboard card. A lot of them even run it main board. I've actually seen some Affinity decks run it. I don't know if it's a great choice or not, but you do see it in a lot of other creature combo based decks, especially as a sideboard. It can protect their key card, and Pod uses one of a lot of other sideboards uses a couple of in the sideboard. And great card. It absorbs a lightning bolt, so it eats a lightning bolt. It can eat an abrupt decay. Keep your other card you want on the board alive. And I think at $2 to $3 it is a bargain, especially, like I said, if Splinter Twin goes off, it takes off, which the dude that just won the last tournament with eggs, he actually recommends, he thinks Splinter Twin is the best positioned right now to win a major event. And so if the previous winner is touting a certain deck, then I do think that there will be a price increase. So we'll go on to Melira. Melira is only usually a 1 or 2 in Melira Pod. but she has a key card to it, and sitting at $1 to $2, and it was $1 $2 when I made the prediction, and she still, I believe, is around $1 to $2. But I do believe that Melira will eventually see a price increase to maybe $3 to $5 come June, and yeah, I'm still sticking with that prediction. The ninth card was Ratchet Bomb, and Ratchet Bomb was a vintage prediction. Vintage is a very, very slow increase. Like cards right now are going to take a while to increase in value, especially Ratchet Bomb and Phyrexian Revoker, which excuse me, was my 10th prediction. Are just cards I believe that if you want to hold on to value, if you're worried about cards being devalued, like when Innistrad rotates, maybe you could just switch over your Olivia right now that's at 12 for 12 Phyrexian Revokers, and within a year you'll still have your value. And Olivia's a bad choice here because Olivia actually does see play in Modern, but we'll say like Sublime Archangel at 30. You trade it in a couple months when I usually like to trade my cards that are going to rotate right when the third set is released. So when Dragon's Maze is released, that's when I want to start dumping my previous block. So say Sublime's still at $30. You trade it for 30 Phyrexian Revokers. That is a smart move. Phyrexian Revoker is never going to go down. It's now at $2. When I made this prediction, it's $1. It's not going to go down. It's a vintage staple. They're not going to. I mean, it's depending if vintage changes, but I mean, it is a very powerful card in vintage. It'll always be a chase card for people that are and they're high rollers. People that play vintage, they don't care about paying a pretty penny for a card. They've already spent thousands of dollars on their Power 9, so picking up a Phyrexian Revoker at $4 is not a big deal. Anyway, that was my Modern review, my 2-month review of the Modern. I will then go on and do some predictions for. I have a lot of new content, a lot of new predictions, a lot of new news from Modern, and some new predictions that I think you should pick up right immediately, as they will see a spike increase in the coming future, especially with Modern Masters coming out in June. Anyway, this is Kevin from RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thank you for watching.